on my clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get rolling here. And let's see here. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And this is our fourth webinar for the 2022 Sharp Plus Safety Certification Program. My name is Megan Pope, and I'm the Managing Director of MRCA, and I'll be filling in for Morgan today. She is out promoting MRCA at the Ohio Roofing Contractors Association golf outing. Today we have Gary Allman of Allman, Mahan and Furry, and he is our legal counsel for MRCA. Gary will be taking us through today's topic, which is heat illness. And Gary, thank you for being here today, and I am going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. Megan and I were chatting before we started, and I mentioned to her that perhaps this is, of the three that I've done, this is the third one, the most important of those three. I think I put it up there with, from an OSHA enforcement perspective, with fall protection as far as the aggressiveness we think we're going to see from OSHA in the high heat season, which is just coming around the corner for us. So heat illness prevention has turned into a very, very hot topic, no pun intended. The part of the reason for that is the Biden administration has identified it as a critical workplace concern issue. And I'm going to talk a little bit in my presentation. Some of the things I've got have come off the press so recently I don't even have slides for them, but I will go through a few things on the OSHA instruction, which just came out less than 30 days ago with regards to heat illness prevention. So we're going to go through some material some of you may have seen before, and hopefully some of the material will be new. I will emphasize, I'm going to say this at the beginning, and I will probably say it a number of times as I go through the slides and over the next hour. As I grade safety applications, if you're part of the Sharp Safety Certification Program with MRCA, you know that participating in the safety program review process is part of that. As I go through the applications and grade those questions on heat illness prevention, one glaring thing that I see in probably about 50% of the applications, and yes, I do take off points, is that the company seems to place all of the responsibility on the employees for complying with the company program for heat illness prevention. And while that's okay, but bottom line is, from an OSHA enforcement perspective, they are looking for you to have a program in place and operational and being operated, and that means your site supervisors have to be on board with making sure your employees are carrying out the various parts of the heat illness prevention program. So let's get started. In the very first slide, this is something I just added. The ABA, American Bar Association, of which I'm a member, has a committee, the OSHA/MSHA committee, which met with, and I was unable to attend this particular meeting, met with various people highly placed in OSHA, including Doug Parker, who's the OSHA director, the new OSHA director appointed by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate, and various other individuals from OSHA and the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission regarding just where is OSHA and MSHA. I mean, it was mostly on OSHA, and where are we going? Where's the OSHA going to be going under the Biden administration? So basically, one of the people who spoke and had a discussion with the attendees was Kimberly Still, who's director of the Directorate of Enforcement Programs of OSHA. And basically, one of the points that she made, and I know this is not, I'm using this for more than one presentation, we'll continue to use the general duty clause to cite employers with COVID hazards. But the second bullet is the important one for what we have today, and that is that OSHA is still in the information gathering phase of heat illness prevention standard. Now, the point here is that OSHA is developing a heat illness prevention standard. My own prediction in my 46 years of experience in dealing with OSHA matters is that the normal time period for promulgating a standard, which is anywhere between 6 and 9 years, is going to be significantly shortened in this case, primarily because we have Doug Parker as a new OSHA head, And Mr. Parker came to OSHA from being the director of California OSHA, Cal-OSHA, which has probably the most stringent, strict heat illness prevention standards for both construction, general industry, and office workers any place in the country. So I really think we're going to see a short track for getting a standard. I don't know that we'll have one this year, but I really think by next year we could probably look to see an OSHA standard in place. And if we do have an OSHA standard, remember something, it's not like a lot of things. It's not like some guidance documents that OSHA publishes. When we have a standard, even if we got a conservative president and a conservative administration after Biden, that doesn't mean they just can't pull a plug on it by like snapping your fingers. They have to go through the rulemaking process. So whatever they develop may be with us for a long period of time. And what they're going to be talking about is either, what they're trying to decide is whether they're going to have a prescriptive standard or a performance standard. They don't know which way they want to go yet. And prescriptive basically establishes triggers or thresholds with required actions. So it would be, if you have ever looked at the OSHA Heat Tool app, when you look at that, you'll see right now, since it was modified about 6 months ago, you'll see 3 levels of heat concerns. And what a prescriptive standard would be, okay, we trigger the caution level in these temperatures. And then we go to the moderate level, then we go to the danger level. And there will be requirements that you would have to take at each level. That's prescriptive. The performance standard basically would give you greater flexibility to fit your policies to your workplaces. It wouldn't matter what the temperature is. The Heat Tool app might tell you the heat index is. You would be able to modify your program for the workplace your people are working in. Now, for roofing contractors, that's not as big a deal as it is for those contractors who are working, maybe some of their work is inside a building and some of it's outside. Your employees are typically exposed to the heat of the sun, the heat of the environmental condition, the whole time they are on the job because they're on a roof. As far as reflective heat, the radiant heat, they're getting it from both ends. So it probably won't make too big a difference which way OSHA jumps on this. But again, if you have a sheet metal shop, for example, it may have some difference. Whereas the heat index might be in the moderate area and indicate certain prescriptive requirements, because if we have a performance standard and you have air conditioning in that place, you would have a greater relaxation of the requirements because of the type of workplace you're providing for your employees. Bottom line, though, the third bullet there, until we get a standard, OSHA will be using the general duty clause as it is for COVID. Whoops, wrong arrow. So, heat illness prevention. In addition, shortly after OSHA announced they were going forward with the standard, and this was actually on about April the 9th or so, OSHA declared a national emphasis program for heat illness prevention. And what that national emphasis program means, and I'll be talking about that in quite a bit of detail in a few minutes. Well, actually, I'm going to talk about it now. Now's a good time. This is what comes out of the OSHA instruction. And even though my camera's on, you can't see what I'm holding up here. This is a document that's about 30 or 40 pages long, which is the OSHA instruction for OSHA to use under the National Emphasis Program for heat illness prevention. And the first thing, and probably the most critical thing OSHA did, was they identified those work areas that are going to be targeted for compliance inspections under the NEP. Don't forget, a National Emphasis Program, I'm going to call it an NEP from here on out. An NEP provides OSHA probable cause to come on your work site. You don't need there doesn't have to be an employee complaint. OSHA doesn't even have to see an a safety violation. The mere fact that you are in the targeted industries is all they have to know. They can drive up to your job site anywhere in the country, any day, and identify your foreman, your superintendent, whoever's running the job, and say, I'm from OSHA, I'm here, I'm going to do an inspection under the National Emphasis Program for heat illness prevention. I want to see your heat illness prevention program. And that's where it would start. And don't forget, while you might say, well, I've got a program, I'll be okay. Don't forget that gets them on the job site. They also will have the right to interview your employees. That may get them up on the roof. And once they get up on the roof, anything else they see that might be a safety violation is fair game. And they only have to see one thing beyond the heat illness prevention thing that got them there, and they can open a general inspection. So for our industry, in my opinion, this gives OSHA basically carte blanche to come onto one of your job sites and perform basically a wide open general inspection using this to get their foot in the door. They have identified construction industries that are likely to have heat-related hazards, and those are those industries which will be targeted for inspection. And one of those is residential building construction, residential, and that is homes, apartment buildings, condominiums, etc. Non-residential building construction, that is pretty much everything else. That would include office buildings, it would include factories or machine shops or chemical plants, or just name it. Anything else would come in there. In addition to that, foundation, structure, and building exterior contractors. Where's the roof installed? On the outside of the building. It makes you an exterior contractor under the NAICS code is 2381 for that. Also, building finishing contractors. That would also pull in roofing contractors. And finally, other specialty trade contractors. That also will pull in roofing contractors. So all these NAICS codes come in under the identified likely to have heat-related hazards. That gets OSHA's foot in the door. And while the instruction says, hey, we want you to inspect for general duty clause violations, in the instruction 2 on page 19, OSHA, the instruction says, basically the compliance officer should also consider whether or not you're in compliance with the General Construction Safety Training and Education Standards. Those are 29 CFR 1926.21 and 29 CFR 1926.20. One of those is the one that requires you to have competent persons on the job site and to meet the definition for a competent person. Another one is with regards to your training programs. And they'll have an ability to interview your employees to see what information you have provided to them to train them with regard to heat illness hazards, protection steps they should be taking, things like hydration, work rest regimen, which I'll be getting into as we go through these slides. All of those things are part of those two standards. So not only do you have to be concerned about the general duty clause violation, I'm going to get into that in a second, but you've also got to be worried about specific standard citations. So what are we talking about with regards to general duty clause? This is it right here. You must provide, this is out of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, for those of you who have either never heard me speak about it before or are not that familiar with OSHA standards versus laws. This is a law. This is not a standard. This is a law. This is part of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, Section 5A1. You must provide your employees with a place of employment that is free of recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. And believe it or not, when I get towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to be telling you things you can do to get yourself into compliance or more into compliance than you might be now. The very first case, the leading case in this whole area, was this case right here, Secretary of Labor, that's OSHA, versus Post-Buckley Shoe. Judge Patrick Augustine was decided on March 15, 2012. And it determined that the criteria in the NIOSH criteria document are feasible steps for you, the employer, to take to protect your employees under the general duty clause. In other words, to provide them a place of employment free of recognized hazards that could cause or would be likely to cause death or serious physical harm of your employees. And these are the 5 components of that criteria document. This is the nub of it right here. Now we're going to take a step back in time in a minute, but this is where we're going to end up. Acclimatization program, work rest regimen program, adequate hydration program, cooling off areas, and a training program. You have to have those 5 components of your heat illness prevention program. As I graded the 26 applications for the MRCA Safety Recognition Award program, I will say that probably only about 50% of them had all 5 of these components covered. Less than 50% had this 2 words in the bottom, supervisor driven. It must be supervisor driven. So let's just quickly go through these before I get back and we take our step back in time for a minute. But let's look at acclimatization. Acclimatization applies to employees who are new to a high heat index job site, or employees who are returning to such a job site after a period of time away from it. I'm just dictating letters right now on those applications. I was told, actually, I just finished dictating, I'm proofing them right now. I was just working on one before I hooked up with Megan for this particular webinar, and one of the applicants said, well, if an employee has been away from the job site for 2 months or more, no, 2 months that's fine, but it's a shorter period of time than that before you need acclimatization. If an employee's been away from a job site with a high heat index for, let's say, a week, 2 weeks, you need to think of an acclimatization program. The acclimatization program does not mean that it doesn't have to be the same for every employee. The brand new employee, you just hired, a couple of young people graduated from high school and decided they really wanted to get into roofing. Believe it or not, there are people there who like our industry, who like the idea of working outside, things like that. So they come to work for your company. They haven't worked, they've been in high school, or they've been in trade school or something like that for the last couple of months or years. Now they're coming out to work with you, and they're going to start with you in July. So now you're going to put them out on a job site where the heat index is 100 degrees. That person needs to go through a period of acclimatization. And that's a gradual exposure to working in that high heat index environment. OSHA, the NIOSH, the background information, and even in the OSHA instruction I was holding up a minute ago, indicates maybe 2 hours for the first day onto the high heat index environment. And each day you increase that exposure time until after about usually 7 to 10 working days, the employee is up to being able to work a full shift in the high heat index environment. Work rest regimen. I'm going to have a slide I'll show you in a minute, and I believe Megan will tell us that these slides are available or will be available because this is being recorded. But if you're participating today, I believe you will be able to get these slides, so you'll be able to get the 2 slides of the charts I'm going to show you. They're taken from NIOSH. And by the way, I should have mentioned this at the outset. I believe you're all hooked in, so if you have a question, you don't have to raise your hand, just speak up, and I will try to answer your question. If it's a question about the slide I'm on, it might be more appropriate to answer it when I'm there. Or you can get on the chat box, which is part of the Zoom app we use, and just type in a question, and Megan will review those for me, and when I'm finished, she'll bring those questions to my attention. So the work rest regimen is going to vary with the heat index, as you will see here in the next slide. And it has to be enforced by the site supervisor, so let's get to that. I'll keep going the wrong way. Here you go. So the left-hand column here shows the heat index, and the heat index here is this column. So let's look at a heat index where we have a heat index of 97 degrees right here. Just pick that out of the sky. So normal work, minutes of work and rest is normal. So if your normal schedule is that your employees will work for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and then they get a 15-minute coffee break, and then they work for 2 hours, and they get a lunch break, etc. You can use that one if the heat index is 97. For light work, I'm not sure when roofing work is light work. I think at best it's moderate work. For moderate work though, your employees can still work under a normal work rest regimen. However, when we get over to heavy work, for a lot of lifting, a lot of heavy work, there's going to be a lot of perspiration. According to the chart here, this is a NIOSH chart. Your employees work for 40 minutes and they get a 20-minute rest break, which they should be taking in a cooling off area. And that's with a heat index of 97 degrees. And I'll show you in an upcoming slide, not right away, and I'll have these both slides together, how we get to a 97 degree heat index. You can, if you have the OSHA Heat Tool app, which I'll remind you about a couple times, it is an app that's available for any smartphone. There's no charge for the app, and no, you are not identifying yourself to OSHA just by downloading that app. They're not going to know you from the other several million people who have that app on their smartphones. It's not going to target you for an OSHA inspection. I strongly suggest at least those of you who are on this phone call get that Heat Tool app on your smartphones, but I would also encourage that everybody all the way down to your site supervisors have it on their phones. So you can see when we get down here though, we get to 105, now we've got 15 minutes of work and 45 minutes of rest for heavy work, 25-35 for moderate work. So you can see how you get to the point where most owners say, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. You mean I'm pulling this crew out there and paying this person for an hour's worth of work, and they're only going to work for 15 minutes and they're going to sit in a cool place for 45? That is part of your compliance program. That's part of what you need to have as far as OSHA is concerned. It's a feasible method of complying with the General Duty Clause requirements of protecting your employees in those situations. So then we go to adequate hydration. Another area, ample cool water on site for all employees. And force employees to hydrate by consuming 8 ounces of water every 15 to 20 minutes and encourage them to drink even though they're not thirsty. What in the world do I mean by that? What does OSHA mean by that? What does NIOSH mean by that? What they mean is that you should encourage your employees every 15 to 20 minutes to consume 8 ounces, and it should be cool water every 15 to 20 minutes. Now, this is one of those areas, let me just segue for a minute into a case that was decided about 4 years ago now, and that's the Sturgill Roofing Company case. And Sturgill Roofing Company is a case we were involved in my firm, and it's a roofing company here in Dayton, Ohio, that had a gentleman who died on a job site, a roofing job site. And by the way, on that job site, the heat index was under 90. It was less than 90. And you can see under 90, it's normal for everybody across the board. This heat index was lower than 90. It turned out after the employee passed away, when they did the autopsy, they found out when he was a temporary employee hired by Sturgill Roofing to come in and help out because they were having trouble getting enough employees. And by the way, this happened, the fatality actually occurred about 8 years ago. That's how long it took to get, it took about 4 years to get this case all the way through the hearings and the review commission appeal, and finally a decision by the full Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission, who overturned the judge. But that employee ended up they found out was in kidney failure. He was addicted to drugs, and he was a drug abuser at the time of this, in kidney failure at the time of this fatality. Congestive heart failure was a diagnosis. But the problem was that after the fatality occurred, the autopsy indicated, and by the way, as soon as you had the fatality, that is reportable to OSHA. You can't wait for the autopsy. If the person dies on your job site, if you have a fatality on your job site, you can't wait to find out the underlying cause. You've got to report it within 8 hours to OSHA. So it turned out but the medical examiner said he had all those conditions, and it was working in a hot environment that accelerated the death. And that's all the judge who heard the case needed to hear. And she wrote a decision that was devastating, because the reason I mention this whole thing is this one point right here. Her decision was that not only should you force employees or encourage employees to consume, you had to guarantee, ensure, E-N-S-U-R-E, otherwise defined as guarantee, that your employees would hydrate by drinking 8 ounces of water every 15 to 20 minutes, and that she was requiring, and said so in her decision, that you, the employer, would have to keep a written record of that. Now picture that. You've got a 10-person crew on the roof. You would need one extra employee who would walk around that roof. Every 15 to 20 minutes, he or she would come up to every employee, pull out a cup with 8 ounces of cool water, and stand there, watch the person drink it, then check their name off the list under that time. Walk around to the whole crew, and by the time they finished 10 or 15 employees, they'd have to start all over again. So you'd be paying one employee just to do that. That part of her decision was overturned by the review commission, but that's how OSHA is going with these things. And by the way, that was not inexpensive to get to that victory. This is what we deal with, and those of you familiar with workers' compensation may know when you're dealing with administrative judges, sometimes you're dealing with judges and people making decisions based upon their own inclination and their interpretation of the law. That's what this judge did. And that was a really tough issue for the employer and for us to deal with, and it cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to finally get this case won. Some people have said in the light of Sturgill Roofing that OSHA can't use the general duty clause, and that is wrong. If anybody tells you that, they are wrong. All it did was it provided some specifics with regards to the fact what was wrong with the judge's decision and the way she looked at the facts and interpreted the facts and applied the law. She was wrong there. So the general duty clause is still alive and well in these kinds of cases. You're also the fourth component of the general duty of the NIOSH criteria document is cooling off areas. You must locate them in close proximity to the job site. They must be easy to get to for all employees. Ideally, not mandatory, but ideally, they should have an ambient temperature of 76 degrees Fahrenheit or cooler, and they should be used during all rest periods and whenever an employee is feeling the adverse effects of working in a high heat index environment. Okay, I'll get to training later, but what happened after Judge Augustine's decision in March of 2012, OSHA issued this memo on July 19th of 2012, and now on April 8th of 2022, OSHA came out with its OSHA instruction. And for those of you who want to look this up yourself, you can get onto the OSHA website. I'm going to give you the identifier for this. These are 3 capital letters, CPL, like Charlie, Peace, Loss, 03-00-024, and you can pull this up yourself and see everything I've been referring to. But back in July 19th of 2012, this was the directive OSHA promulgated, and a lot of this is still, most of it is still applies today. It's a directive to expedite heat-related inspections and to issue citations. That was the purpose for this memo. Read the second part here. Issue citations. Where does it come about? Protect the lives and safety of employees. Issue citations. Goal is to result in swift abatement and reduce heat-related illnesses and death. And the references were supposed to be back to the NOAA heat index chart, which I'll be getting to here in a few minutes. The memo suggests that actions that could identify the general duty clause violation in number 1, workers exposed to heat index at or above the danger zone means they're exposed to a hazard. Working outside most of the day with a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration heat advisory in place. And we see those during hot weather. When it gets really nasty, you'll see those even your local weather agencies, stations, monitoring, National Weather Service offices will issue a heat advisory. When there's a heat advisory, you really need to pay attention. It doesn't have to get that high though. Don't get complacent about this. You don't have to get a heat advisory before OSHA can exercise the National Emphasis Program, the NEP. They can do that. They could do that today. Even if it's, I think it's 80 degrees here in Dayton, Ohio. But even if it's 70 degrees where you are, they could still come out and just start an inspection saying, anticipating warmer weather, we want to see your program. hazards recognized, they will conclude that you've got a hazard that you recognized. If there's a heat advisory, whether your employees are complaining about the heat, they'll be doing employee interviews, they'll be asking them signs and symptoms of heat exposure. If they observe them or any employees indicate, yes, I feel a little bit dizzy every now and then, that sort of thing, that's another indication. And if they say, yes, I told my foreman about that, but he or she didn't do anything, boom. As soon as they report their concerns or their feelings to the foreman or supervisor, they have now communicated a hazard to you, the employer. The foreman is the extension of management on the job site. As soon as they've communicated their concerns, boom, they've communicated the hazard to you. Or you acknowledge heat issue by providing some but not all of remediation. So if you go part way, if you say, okay, hey guys, we got igloo coolers on the job site, they're there, use them. That's all it takes to indicate that you've acknowledged that there's an issue, because you provided cool water for your employees to drink. So you've acknowledged there's an issue, you have recognized the hazard. Or your industry issues guidance. And just about every construction-related industry is doing that now. So it's pretty much a well accepted. You're going to find it very difficult. In fact, I would say you have about 1 chance in a million of defending yourself in a general duty clause citation by saying, well, we didn't recognize it as a hazard. We didn't recognize heat as a hazard. That's why, and we don't recognize heat as a hazard up here because we're in North Dakota. That's not going to get it for you. There are hot days in North Dakota. It just takes one hot day and you're there. Causing or likely to cause heat exhaustion, heat stroke, fatalities, death, or serious physical harm. And then feasible or useful measures, and these are the things I was just mentioning and Ray talked to you about, and these were things mentioned in Judge Augustine's decision, where as I mentioned, he mentioned all the 5 components of the NIOSH criteria document, and these are the first 4 that I've already talked to you about, and the 5th one is training. We'll be talking about that one. Heat illness prevention, like I said, they've declared a national emphasis program. Here's that heat chart, that chart. It's important you understand this. If you don't want to use the Heat Tool app, then you need to monitor your humidity and temperature. Even if you just got an Apple smartphone, there's a little blue app on the phone with a white cloud. I call that Apple weather. And if you go on there, it will give you the temperature, it will give you the humidity. And it will also tell you what does it really feel like. But that don't get locked into that. If you get the temperature and humidity, temperature's here, humidity's here. You've seen these charts, I'm sure charts like this for other things. So all you do, let's take a temperature. Let's say it's 84 degrees in Dayton, Ohio right now. And let's say we had a 75% humidity. We have a heat index of 92, and that means we're in extreme caution. And then we would go to, again, if you were the Heat Tool app, you could click on precautions, and it would tell you precautions on the Heat Tool app that you need to take. The nice thing about this is that I'm not encouraging you to limit yourself, especially because you don't want to be in a situation where you end up with somebody hospitalized for treatment because of heat stroke, and you have to report that to OSHA, and you've only used a couple of the recommended tools. You didn't use all of the tools that are in the 5-step NIOSH criteria document. But you can go to the OSHA Heat Tool app and it will give you some precautions you can implement. But just as another example, if we're just, let's say, 94-degree temperature, 85% humidity, we now have a heat index of 129 degrees, we're in the extreme danger area. I actually have reviewed some applications, both in the roofing industry and a couple of my other trade association clients, where the company, when they get to the extreme danger area, and that's this dark red area right here, and like I said, you'll be able to get copies of these slides, get a copy of the presentation. You can print these out if you want. They're not copyrighted, they're government documents. But companies, when they get in this dark red area, they stop work for the day. They're not going to mess with it. They stop work for the day. And I put these two together, even though we're repeating this one. This is the one you saw a little while ago. And the important thing here is now you know what the heat indexes are. And so we go back here, and let's say we found out we're at 90, let's say 90 degrees 70% humidity, we have 103. Then we go here, we look at 103 heat index, and if we're doing moderate work, the employee should be working for 30 minutes and resting for 30 minutes, and in heavy work, working for 20, resting for 40. And if you may be asking yourself, how do I even get any production done if my employees are resting for 40 minutes for every 20 minutes they work? That's a good question. That's a decision you've got to make as to how you're going to move forward on a job site and get work done and protect your employees. And don't forget, this is one component. The work rest regimen is one component of the 5 components. This is one of the reasons I always encourage my clients, when it comes to having a heat illness prevention program, to sit down with a company doctor. And if you don't have a company doctor, Google occupational medicine. And you're going to get a bunch of names of doctors in your geographical area or your town. If you're a city the size of Dayton or any moderately large community, you're going to find some occupational medicine doctors. Schedule an appointment with those and take your heat illness prevention program and sit down with them and say, hey doc, if I am working with my employees and I've got this set up, and I recognize that if I'm dealing with a heat index, let's say of 100 degrees, and we're doing heavy work, I'm supposed to work them for 30 minutes and let them rest for 30 minutes. Is there any way I can increase the work time and reduce the rest time? I believe, and this is not legal advice, although in a way it is, I believe you can, by modifying the other 4 aspects, or the other 3 aspects, training is not one of the other 3 aspects of your program, you might be able to get a doctor to agree that, yeah, you can work them for 45 and rest for 15 here, just like you can on moderate work, if you do these things. Increase hydration, provide a real cooling off area. Instead of just taking them out of the sun and putting them in shade as a cooling off area, provide an air conditioned area. There may be ways you can modify your other steps to increase the period of work versus the rest period. And I firmly believe if you have an occupational medicine specialist sign off on that, OSHA, they might cite you, but you can win that case if you can show you use a medical professional to create the situation you're working under. Okay, then basically what OSHA's told, and this goes back to that 2012 compliance letter, if some but not all 4 of the preceding components are present, climatization, work rest, adequate hydration, and cooling off areas, OSHA is to issue a hazard alert letter. So what they're saying is, if you have, this is not a citation, this is a warning. This is like you were caught going 45 and a 35 and the cop decides he's going to just give you a warning. That's what this is. So the hazard alert letter puts you on notice. OSHA considers that your people have been working in a hazard, and yes, OSHA is going to they will document this. You're in their database now. You got this letter. They come out to another job site and find the same thing on that job site. The next time, you may very well be looking at a serious General Duty Clause violation. And one other quick point, don't forget, General Duty Clause violations, OSHA cannot negotiate those down to other than serious. They are always going to be serious, repeats, or willfuls. They will cannot take them below that because, by definition, they're serious because it's causing a likelihood of death or serious physical harm. Because of that definition in the law, they cannot be negotiated down. So if you're at all concerned about pre-quals, ISNet World, you need to be concerned about this because the only way you get rid of a General Duty Clause violation is to litigate it. You either pay the fine and live with it for 3 to 5 years when you might not be able to bid some big jobs because the owner says if you have a serious violation in the last 3 to 5 years, you can't bid. You either live with it under those circumstances or litigate it. And I'll tell you, conservatively, I mentioned this before a group down in Nashville, with Megan. I even forgot when we were down there early last week, and I mentioned the fact. I said the cost to litigate one of these is going to be between $35,000 and $50,000. And one of the gentlemen in the audience, this was a group of installation contractors, says, "Where the hell do I find a lawyer that cheap, that inexpensive?" I'm telling you about what I get, what it costs if I do it. But yes, I'm on the low end. I'm not saying that. That's not an advertisement, but just bear in mind, you could spend $35,000 to $100,000 to litigate that case, depending on the lawyer you use and all the other things that go on in the OSHA litigation. So you get, and of course, it could ace you out of being able to bid $1 million worth of work. So you've got to weigh the economic benefit. Questions for the compliance officer to answer. These are things they're going to answer. This is great information for you, because when he or she comes out to your job site, this is what they're going to be looking for. I'm not going to go through all of these. You're going to, like I said, will be accessible to you. But are there any heat-related illnesses on your OSHA 300 log? Don't forget, they can demand to see your OSHA 300 log going back 3 to 5 years. So if they did the inspection tomorrow, they could ask to see your 300 log 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, and 2017, and 2022 up till now. Are there any heat-related incidents reported? Bingo. If the work they're doing is in direct sun or non-air conditioned, yeah, I guess so. They're on a roof. They're going to be in direct sun. Is it potentially evaluated or monitored by you, the employer? Is heat stress? Length of time on the job. How much time do they work up on that roof exposed to the direct sun? What actions do you take to protect them? Do you have a heat stress prevention program? Boy, if you don't have one, you're toast. I'm telling you that right now. If you do not have a program, you should get off it. When this call's over, this webinar's over, I'd call Megan, ask her for a copy of these slides, and start working and getting my program together. You don't want to go into the warm weather without a program, a written program, a copy on every job site and every employee trained, and a climatization program. Water, do you have drinking water available? These are questions again for the CSHO. Workers required to drink water. Do you enforce that requirement? Water coolers throughout the day available 100% of the time. Work rest regimen. Shade. Do you provide shade to the employees? Health effects. Do you have any employees who are experienced or have experienced health effects from working in high heat? What is done if employees suffer heat-related health effects? Emergency notification and first aid. All these questions they'll have to ask you, but they're going to ask your employees when they interview them. And these are confidential interviews. You will not know unless OSHA will not share this information. You can always sit down with your employees and say, hey, I know OSHA guy interviewed you. Do you mind telling me what you discussed with him? But if you ever do that, please be sure you start that conversation with, look, I'm trying to make sure I have the best program around. There's nothing, if you tell me what went on in that conversation, you've created a situation for yourself that I cannot touch you. No matter what you said, no matter how much you may have damned the company, I can't discipline you for it. I can't do anything negative to you. You are protected. Be sure you say that before you ever ask an employee what they discussed with an OSHA compliance officer, because if you have to file a notice of contest and get into litigation, believe me, the OSHA lawyer is going to ask them those questions when he or she gets them on the witness stand. That's going to happen. Training. Here's a training. Have your employees receive training on heat-related illnesses and the effects of heat. And here's a training they should have. Do they know the common signs and symptoms of heat illness? And actually before that, do they know the different kinds of heat illnesses? Then have you just trained them on what the different signs and symptoms are of heat illnesses? Do they know the proper precautions they should take? They should avoid energy drinks, alcohol, and caffeine. Do they know to listen to their body? You feel a little woozy, you're feeling a little nauseous, you're feeling lightheaded, anything like that. You need to take a break, go to a cooling off area, cool down, and drink water. I had a heart issue 5 years ago, and I go to a rehab program now, cardiac rehab program. And one of the things our nurses do after we go through the rehab, they take our blood pressure. And dehydration is a big issue. Your blood pressure drops way down if you're dehydrated. And what I'm saying is, that means that if you're not adequately hydrating, right here, importance of drinking water frequently, your blood pressure drops, and when your blood pressure drops, you can become disoriented, you can become lightheaded, you can pass out, all those kinds of things. Do they know the importance of acclimatization? This is again training. The importance of drinking water frequently. And what should they do if somebody does have the symptoms of heat illness? Your employees also should know the different types, I mentioned that already. Underlying conditions, what they need to know, and Got to be careful how you communicate this to them also. You need to communicate to them, if you have underlying conditions, you may be much more susceptible to heat illness than someone without those conditions. And those are conditions like heart disease, high blood pressure, overweight, diabetes, and there are various other conditions. If you have those, you may be more susceptible. If you've ever had heat stroke in the past, you're about 30% more susceptible to get heat illnesses again. If you had heat stroke any time in the past, your body is more likely to end up in a problem situation now because of working in a high index environment. And then finally, the importance of electrolyte drinks. One of the guidelines that OSHA provides is, under electrolyte drinks, if any employee sweats profusely for 2 hours or more, they should be required to drink electrolytes and replace the electrolytes in their body. Now, under this new OSHA instruction, when we're talking about the questions OSHA is going to ask, they provide us with a new list of things to consider, that the compliance officer is going to consider. And here are the 2022, here's the 2022 list. Didn't have time to make a slide of this. I'm just going to go down these bullets. The compliance officer shall determine if the employer has a heat illness injury program addressing heat exposure and considering the following. Is there a written program? How did the employer monitor the ambient temperature and levels of work exertion of the work site? The charts we just looked at. Was there unlimited cool water that was easily accessible to employees? And you need individual drinking cups, throwaway drinking cups. Did the employer require additional breaks for hydration? Did you or did you not? Were there scheduled rest breaks? Yes or no? Was there access to a shaded area? Yes or no? Did the employer provide time for acclimatization of new or returning workers? And here's a new one. Was a buddy system in place on hot days? And what that means is, did you have a situation where you have your employees keeping an eye on each other? You have two people and you say, Joe, I want you to keep an eye on Pete, and John, you keep an eye on Bill, whatever, and vice versa. That's another question they're asking now. Were administrative controls used? Earlier start times. You start earlier in the morning and quit earlier in the afternoon. Or do you rotate employees on and off the roof? Do you have jobs employees can perform where they're not in direct sunlight on the roof? Maybe the jobs they're performing are in the shade. Do you rotate employees in and out of those jobs? And did you provide them training on heat illness signs, etc., things we've just talked about? Those are the questions they're going to be asking, and those are the things, don't forget, they'll ask you, they'll ask your site supervisor. You may not be on that job site. Be sure your site supervisor is trained on this, but they will also interview the employees. The site supervisor has to understand you better be doing these things, because if you tell OSHA that yes, you've done all these things, and the employees say, bull crap, they've not done any of this stuff. There's hardly any water. We can't get 5 minutes to go get a water break, etc. That's what they're telling the compliance officer. You've got a real issue, and that supervisor could find himself federal obstruction of justice, because OSHA is going to take the position, if they can prove it, that he did lie to them, that he lied to them, and that's big time problems. Then, is the competent person on the site able to deal with heat-related illnesses? Don't forget, 1926-21B2 have to have a competent person make frequent and regular visits to the job site, or a full-time competent person on the job site. If not, is there someone else with that level of training on heat-related illnesses? You hear me talk, I've talked many times with regards to safety monitor, when you're working with warning lines and a safety monitor on a low-slope roof, and the fact that the safety monitor has to be a competent person trained as to what it takes to be a safety monitor. This is the same thing. Do I have a competent person on the job site who's trained in heat-related illnesses, that understands all those things and components having to protecting employees in a height environment? What should you do? And again, these are slides that are available for you. These are things you need to do, these next few slides. I'm running low on time, so I'm going to pull through these a little bit quickly. I got about 10 minutes left. Number one, you need to have a written heat stress program. Please, folks, don't think I've got a verbal program. I don't put things in writing. I don't have it in writing. I've got a verbal program. Yeah. Those of you who know me know I've said this 1,000 times, if once. If it ain't in writing, as far as OSHA is concerned, if it ain't in writing, it doesn't exist, it didn't happen. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. If you don't have a written program, you don't have a program. And you can talk until you are blue in the face. It's an old expression my father used to use with me. You can talk till you're blue in the face. You're not going to convince that compliance officer that you have a program if it isn't in writing. You've got to have a written heat illness prevention program. And I'm not sure if Megan, I think we have an MRCA safety manual template. I'm pretty sure we do. And this heat illness prevention program is in that safety program template and the components you need. So that's something you might want to have if you don't have it.
Yes.
If you have someone on site who's trained to deal with high heat work environment, that's that competent person we talked about right here. Number 3, use the heat index chart or your smartphone app. I think you should use both. I think you should use both. And I really think you need to look at the what should you do's here and add those to whatever you see on the app. Whatever the smartphone app tells you, add this next several slides worth of things you should be doing for heat illness prevention to what that app tells you. Always have adequate cooling drinking water, cool drinking water available. Now, don't forget that one of the questions that OSHA is asking is, do you have unlimited water available? I don't have to be unlimited, but you need multiple igloo coolers with cool water. You need disposable drinking cups, plenty of them, and you need to encourage and require your employees to hydrate frequently. Be sure you give them time to go to the cooler and get a drink of water, even if it requires extra time. Don't say, look, you're working 45 minutes, getting a 15-minute break. I expect you to be working for 45 minutes. You go get a drink of water when you get that 15-minute break. Don't forget, the OSHA guideline is if you're in moderate heat, you should be drinking 8 to 10 ounces of cool water every 15 to 25 minutes. That's inside that 45-minute time frame. You got to work these, think through these, think what is going to be expected. Don't forget, you don't want a general duty clause violation. Be sure to work, and that should be rest. I apologize for the typo. The work-rest regimen is tied into the heat index. You've already seen the slide on that. What should you do continued? Have a work-rest regimen and hydration schedule reviewed and approved by the company doctor or an occupational medicine doctor. Pay $100 or $200. Have the doctor go over the program with you and just say, doctor, you got to just assume for me right now that everybody working on this, I trained them and warned them about underlying physical conditions. So for purposes of this, presuming everybody working for me does not have any underlying conditions, is this that you will feel this is adequate to protect my employees? And show them the work-rest regimen and all the other bells and whistles in your program. Number 9, have a climate-controlled cooling off area close to the work area within a 5-minute walk. That case in numbers 2 slide I showed you, the shoe case by by Judge Augustine, was a case in which the employee began feeling ill effects of heat. He complained to his foreman, and the foreman said, why don't you go back to the parking lot, get in your truck, turn on the air conditioner, and that'll cool you off. Sounds good. The cooling off area is only about a 10-minute walk away. This was out in the desert, though. They found his body 5 hours later. He was delirious. He got away from the work area, wandered off into the desert, finally passed out and died. That's the kind of thing you've got to think through what might happen if you don't follow these guidelines. Have an acclimatization program, have documentation of all the training on heat index, on heat stress, have someone who's able to identify heat-related problems and has the authority to take independent corrective actions immediately. The OSHA Heat Tool app, this is just a quick summary. The OSHA Heat Tool app, 78 degrees Fahrenheit, heat index 78 degrees is the caution area. 78 to 94 is warning. 94 and up is danger. And the caution level, this is what the Heat Tool app recommends. I've taken this right off the app, so if you don't have the app and you just get these slides, you can see those things. This is what they're telling you, the employer, you should do if you're in the caution level for the heat index. If you're in the warning level, this is what you should do. Knowledgeable person, in addition to what's in the caution level, knowledgeable person on site to set up work-rest regimen schedules and modify work activity. And if you're in the danger level, then these are the additional steps you should take in addition to the last 2 slides. Establish a clear drinking schedule. Stop work if protective measures are not possible. reschedule non-essential work for a cooler time of day or cooler day. Actively encourage your workers to drink water often. Same basic hydration schedule as for the warning level, which goes back to the second level. Knowledgeable person modify work activities and set work with schedules. Questions? I'm finished. Anybody have any questions? I'm here at your disposal. We've got about 5 minutes, I think.
Okay, Gary, we do have one question in the chat. How would you recommend addressing COVID concerns regarding the sharing of drinking water and cups?
Well, first of all, okay, you don't share cups. You have disposable cups, and therefore there really is no COVID issue if employees take a disposable cup, put it under the spout on the Igloo cooler, push the little button. If you want to be absolutely sure, then keep a stack of little wipes there, so after Gary Allman pushes the button and gets his cup of water, he pulls a wipe and wipes off the button, throws away the wipe, walks away with his cup. After he's drunk out of his cup, he crumbles it up and throws it in the disposable area and gets a fresh cup the next time he hydrates. That's how you make that work. The other alternative, although it's going to be a heck of a lot more expensive for you, is to have individual drink bottles, and you can get little 8 ounce bottles of either purified water or spring water, but that's not environmentally recommended, I'm sure. But the other side of it is it's a heck of a lot more expensive than having a couple of big Igloo coolers loaded down with ice water and using the little wipe to wipe off the button that you push when you get the water out of the cooler. That's what I would recommend there. And I think you'd be fine from a COVID standpoint. Besides that one other point, the most recent medical literature I've seen on COVID indicates that it's very, very limited chance, a very, very limited chance that you can contract COVID or that it can be passed from one employee to the other by touching surfaces. The medical science is pretty much at the point now where they're saying COVID is primarily like tuberculosis. It's through the moisture, the droplets, aerosol droplets. When you speak, even if you're speaking, you're not spitting or anything, but there's a little bit of aerosol. That's why they talk about the 6 foot distance, but that's primarily how it's transmitted, not by touching something somebody else has touched. Okay, then I just saw here on the chat, I just opened it up. I don't know if you saw this or not, but I got it on my chat. For 2 years, we have supplied bottled water to all crews. That's fine. Like I said, that would obviously be the preferred way of doing it. But don't forget, if you do it that way, it's supposed to be cool water, number one, and number two, that you've got to have enough bottles so the employees get enough water under the circumstances. And somebody else said, are you aware of others going back to water coolers? Yes, I am. I've got several clients who've gone back to water coolers with disposable cups, with the disposable wipes, I forget what they're called, the sanitizer wipes that you can get with Purell or something like that on them, and they wipe them down. But like I said, to me that's a minor concern because of the everything I've been reading in the literature has indicated that the likelihood of transmitting COVID because of touching the surface of somebody who's got COVID who touched it right before you did is minimal. But just to be safe, I would have the sanitizing wipes there, direct my employees, take the cup down to the dispenser, or here's a stack of cups, you take the top cup off the stack, have it upside down, it slides off the top, put it under the spout, push the button, fill the cup, release it, take the wipe right there, wipe off the button, go away and drink the cup, crumble it, throw it away. Don't use the same cup, because then you go back with that same cup and put it under the spout. Now you're touching a cup that's touched your mouth. There's a likelihood, that's a greater likelihood than when you push the button. Anything else, Megan?
We do not have any other questions.
Folks, let me just quickly before Megan closes, anybody who's on this webinar, I say this every time, nobody's ever taken advantage of it, but I'll say it. I hope I'm not wasting my breath. As General Counsel for the MRCA, don't forget you get one free 30-minute phone call with me every month at no charge to you. That the MRCA covers my charge, which is reduced because it's for the MRCA. But I offer something special to those who participate in my webinars. I will not even charge the MRCA if any of you have a question You see my email address right on this slide, gwa@amfdayton.com. I'm going to give you my cell phone number right now. I prefer if you call me on that. It's 937-673-4602. So if you have a question, call me or email me. Say, Gary, I was on the webinar you did on heat illness prevention, or safety cultures, which I did, or distracted driving, which I did. I have a question for you. I will answer your question. I won't even charge the MRCA. It will just be 100% on me, because that's how concerned I am about safety and keeping you all out of trouble. I want to be sure any question you have gets answered. So if you have it for the next 30 days, let's make it for the next 30 days so it doesn't go forever. Anytime for the next 30 days, today's the 10th, till the 10th of June, email me or call me on my cell phone. I'll talk to you or email you one time, and no charge to the MRCA or to you. I can't do more for you than that. I don't want anybody to say, well, that nobody gave me enough information, so I want to be sure you have it. Oh, Megan just sent that out. You put that in the chat. Okay, so you all have it. That's the cell phone number. Okay, Megan, I'll shut up and let you close.
Hey, that's okay. Appreciate it very much. Great presentation, and thanks everybody that attended today. Just a couple things before we depart. If you are listening to this webinar after, we've recorded it in real time, I need you to email Morgan with today's code, which is hot topic. So again, if you're listening to this webinar as a recording and you need credit, please email Morgan with the code word, which is hot topic, to get credit. If you're here right now listening live, you do not need to email Morgan. We already have a record of your attendance and you're good to go. The next webinar is going to be May 24th. Same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. And we will have Matt McCreary of Safety Resources Indianapolis. And he's going to join us to discuss steep slope safety for your employees. Last thing, don't forget to save the dates for this year's joint conference and expo with RCAT. And those dates are September 27th through the 29th, and we will be in Fort Worth, Texas. So that's all we have for today. See you guys on the 24th, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.